Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers. I'm talking about a book from the Legal Action Group. It's this one here. It's called Human Trafficking, Human Rights, Law and Practice by Sandhya. And there's a review of it by myself and my wife Elizabeth on Flickr and all the main internet sites that take reviews we're allowed to put on. The title that we've given this review is A Most Formidable Weapon Against Modern Slavery, Modern Human Rights. And it really comes out as a result of the presentation which Sandhya did with Mrs. Justice Cox at the LAG function where the book was launched. And these are really the questions that we're looking about in this important area. If you've always regarded slavery as the scourge of times gone by and best forgotten, the purpose of this book is to think again. Slavery has now emerged as a very contemporary problem in the form of what we now call human trafficking. At the presentation, we didn't hear the word slavery really. It's mentioned in the foreword by Mrs. Justice Cox, but the point about this is that we're now referring to it as human trafficking, which tends to denote something slightly different from the emotive term slavery. Sandhya's new book on the subject, therefore, is aptly described by its publishers, the Legal Action Group, as a unique and timely publication, and is, as far as we're aware, the only legal textbook currently available which focuses on and explores the problem and its possible remedies so extensively and thoroughly. Not only does it set out to explain theoretical issues, which I'm grateful for, but it gives definitions and legal terminology, and it also provides practical guidance on how to assist victims. And it covers both the use of civil law and criminal law, and will be invaluable not only for practitioners but advisors and policymakers, as well as non-specialist practitioners who are likely to encounter this sort of trafficking problem and will need practical guidance in order to help them. And that's really very much the remit of the Legal Action Group, and another very welcome book in their stable. I'd also say that it's a timely response to what's become a major problem in the United Kingdom. Lamentably, it's become a destination here with increasing numbers of people from impoverished areas of the world who are lured or forcibly transported, then subsequently abused and enslaved. And we recall, of course, the enormity of the problem, which first began to emerge following the breakup of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s, and the state of semi-anarchy which then ensued in many of the newly liberated Eastern European states. In a dreadful irony, perhaps, then, many of those who've been freed from one form of tyranny fall prey to what Sandhya refers to as slavery-like practices, with women and children becoming the main victims. We think, therefore, it's worth quoting from the book, at least partially, the admirable summary of such practices in the following way, and I've covered them in the internet review in a bit more depth. It looks at things like debt bondage, which is the status or condition arising from a pledge by a debtor of his or her personal services or those of a person under his or her control as security for a debt. Common, obviously, as many will know, in various parts of the world. You've got serfdom. Obviously that connotes all sorts of things for people, students of history, but here it refers to a tenant bound by law, custom or agreement to live and labour on land belonging to another person and is not free to change his or her status. Then we've got a new word, which in fact Google didn't spot, commodification of marriage. Any institutional practice whereby a woman without the right to refuse is promised or given in marriage on payment of a consideration in money or in kind to her parents, guardian, family or any other person or group, and also secondly, the husband of a woman, his family or clan, has the right to transfer her to another person for value received or otherwise, and in addition to that, a woman on the death of her husband is liable to be inherited by another person. And then you've got exploitation of a child. Any institution or practice whereby a child or young person, which is someone under the age of 18, is delivered by either or both of the children's natural parents or guardians to another person, whether for reward or not, with a view to the exploitation of the child or young person or his or her labour. And as I say, it's an interesting area to look at these 4 particular points which I think come out of the book. It's distinguished as well for its rigorous scholarship, and Drew's book succeeds in its aim of setting out the legal framework and practice at national level regarding human trafficking, including the changes resulting from the UK's ratification of the Council of Europe Convention on Action Against Trafficking in Human Beings from the 1st of April 2009. As I mentioned, Sandhya was joined by Mrs. Justice Laura Cox at the recent book launch, and I interviewed both of them, and they were clearly very passionate, but in a stoic way, if you like, in that they recognised the huge amount of work that has to be done. And frankly, I came away realising that the best thing is education, to teach people what's going on and say, this is just not the sort of thing we do. That's very much, in my view, the teaching that we have with human rights legislation in its current form. I think it also illustrates how much work, of course, still needs to be done to educate people on the subject, because an awful lot of people have very little knowledge of what's really happening, except, of course, when they read their newspapers. And therefore, to sum up, in the continuing fight against slavery in all its forms, including the vile practice of human trafficking, we're sure that Sandhya's book will emerge as the most formidable weapon of its own to combat this truly terrible trade and all that it currently stands for in the 21st century. The sooner we can end it, the better. Thank you very much, Sandhya. Bye-bye.